Let's take a look at Mark and Luke. What were how did they write about divorce and remarriage?
In the house, once again, the disciples asked him this, Christ teaching on Edenic ideal for marriage.
Right.
So he told them, whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her, and if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery.
So, if you think back to what we read in Matthew, remember we just read in the chapter 5, where he says, if everyone who divorces his wife except for immorality makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Here, we have a little different take. It says, if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. Did you notice the little slight difference there? Now all of a sudden we do have a woman initiating a divorce. So here's the question. Why do you think Mark may have included Christ's mention of women divorcing husbands, but Matthew didn't? Because remember, the four Gospels give four perspectives of the same stuff, but four different views and different audiences. Because they're writing to different groups. So Mark all of a sudden makes mention of women divorcing their husbands, but Matthew never did.
Is that because he was writing to a Greek audience? Because in ancient Greece...
Thou art close.
I know a little bit about Greek mythology, so I'm trying to tie it back into that, but...
Jeremy says it's interesting, never thought about that. Myrna said on YouTube, really great subject, because many of us have been confused. I think many of us. Yeah, and again, it's not to... It's not Jesus giving a pass for hatred and anger and lust and divorce and adultery, but it is something showing what God's ideals are and the fact that He is here to rescue us when we fail to meet them.
See, Dudley was thinking the exact same thing as me. I think Mark may have been including the Greek and Roman cultures.
So Matthew's writing to a Jewish audience, from the best we can tell. So
that makes me happy.
Why would he's not going to mention something that's so inapplicable and counterculture to the Jewish tradition. But Mark highlights women initiating a divorce because he's writing to a non-Jewish audience where this would make more sense. Okay, so again, why would Matthew include that little tidbit? If it wasn't necessary. Jeremy said, I was thinking the same thing. Maybe he's trying to address the broader culture. I would concur. Let's take a look at Dr. Luke, the great physician, the beloved physician.
Everyone who divorces his wife and marries someone else commits adultery, and the one who marries a woman divorced from her husband commits adultery.
If you're interested in doing a deeper dive on this subject, this is literally the only verse Luke ever mentions divorce. And it's not even
in Acts?
Yeah, it's not even in the same context. In this context, he's warning about the corruption, selfishness, and greed of the Pharisees, okay? And it's like Jesus is rebuking the Pharisees, and he throws this little nugget in there. And you say, wow, okay, so here's a question. Why might Dr. Luke have taken such a minimalistic approach in writing about divorce to what was probably an influential Greek audience? And he presents it in a way where he's faithful to the teaching of Jesus, but it's sort of wrapped up in this condemnation of the Pharisees' hypocrisy rather than some other context. It's tough. This is Gray Matter Sunday. So Dana said, I agree with Myrna that it's been confusing in the Big C Church, mainly because my experience is we try and fit the scriptures into our situations instead of aligning our situations to God's Word.
I mean, wasn't it very common within Greek and Roman cultures, divorces and remarriages?
It was, and if you look at Luke's writings, both in Luke and Acts, and possibly even his sphere, he was writing to a much more sophisticated, influential, wealthier Greek audience from what we can tell.
So was it less common in those?
And it was probably very common. He's probably writing.
That's what I was thinking.
He's probably writing to a very, wealthy, influential Greek audience that this is very, this is in their past, and rather than doing a deep dive like Matthew did, as we're about to see. Or even as Mark did. He's just, oh, by the way, let me tell you about the Pharisees, and they were this, and this, and then Jesus even had to warn him about, divorce, almost like, he's saying...
It's a little more passive-aggressive.
Exactly. Luke is, he's inspired, but he's shrewd, okay? So...
is it shrewd or is it just passive-aggressive?
He got his point through, but it was presented a little bit differently, to his audience. So,
or maybe his audience would have better received it if it was a little more low-key than so in your face.
He almost presents it like, well, this was Jesus dealing with this Jewish sect, but he's still getting Jesus' message correct.